Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Progress City Radio Hour in our town hall. Again, second episode in a row. I'm joined here with my brother, Michael Crawford. Michael, welcome back to the town hall. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be back. Happy to have another town hall in the bucket, ready to go.
That's right. Yeah, and we're continuing where we left off last episode. With a great guest here in Davy Feiten. Michael, I have enjoyed hearing you talk with him. You know, another guest with decades and decades of experience on some of our favorite attractions.
Absolutely. And one of those people that, we talked to him over the course of 2 episodes for about 4 hours, but you still get the feeling that there's so much more that could be said. There's so many more stories to be told, because he worked on so many things and so many exciting things. Last time we talked a lot about the Epcot shows he worked on. If you missed those, you should go back and listen to those. But, we had Country Bears left to go, so we've got that to talk about and all sorts of other things.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you could bet that almost any show that came along, he had some kind of hand in that had Audio-Animatronics in it, at least. And some work outside of Disney as well. So
absolutely,
a lot of great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. He's done a lot of stuff since his Disney time in film and in teaching and more animatronics stuff, and has sort of been all over. And so really excited to see, what he gets up to next, because it's all interesting.
That's right. All right, well, let's jump into this. We'll pick up where we left off and hear Michael's interview with Davy Feiten.
Well, one of the things when I said I was going to talk to you that I had multiple people contact me about that they wanted to hear about were the Country Bear shows that you worked on. People really wanted to hear about that. So could you tell us how, I guess it was the Christmas show came first that you worked on?
The show, came first.
Yeah, how did that come about?
What happened is I was an animator at Epcot, and I was working on American Adventure, the Energy Pavilion, and World of Motion, and some weird computer show that talked about Dax Central that I didn't like. But American Adventure I did like. But after I was all done, they sent me to Tokyo, and it was kind of like Hall of Presidents for the Japanese little animatronic show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all in Japanese. But after I was done with that, I returned back to California, and I didn't have any work, and they were laying everybody off. And I was kind of worried about losing my job because there was no work in the company anywhere.
Yeah.
Both Tokyo was done, Epcot was done. And Rick Rothschild, who I worked with, he was the director on American Adventure. He and I were talking. I said, hey, I want to get involved in creative and create some of my own, shows. And how do I get started? And he said, well, you're really good with animatronics, and they're looking for a bear band show based on a Christmas show. Why don't you storyboard it? You know how to storyboard and sketch, and why don't you storyboard it out and pitch it? And he said, nobody else wants to do it. Why don't you take it? And I said, great, I'll try it. I'll give it a shot. And I went and talked to my manager, Jack Taylor, and he was the manager of the animation department. And he said, sure. He didn't have any work for me either. So he was looking for something. And so I started working on it. I started storyboarding, doing color sketches. I'd gone down to Disneyland, took photographs of the bears, and tried to learn the show really well. And as I progressed on this, Jack kept coming in and checking on my work. And Mike Sprout was the other animator in our department. He was in the same office with me. And Jack said, hey, why don't you have Mike help you? He's a really good writer, and he's good at gags. And I knew Mike really well. I mean, we shared the same office, and we're both animators. But I never worked with him before as a writer. As him as a writer and me as the storyboard artist. But, I said, sure, why not? And we started working on it, and it just worked out great. We kind of worked well as a team. And we got it all done. We got the script written. We got all the songs picked. We did all the artwork. And we got to meet with Randy Bright and pitch it to him. And he loved the show. He thought the show was great. He said, but I don't want to do a Christmas show. I want to do another show because Christmas show only lasts 4 to 6 weeks. And we need a show that lasts 6 months or longer, And because it's not worth putting all that money into it to do this whole show that only lasts 6 weeks. It's not profitable. And we kind of understood his point, but we liked the Christmas show. We really were impressed with it, and we wanted to do it. So he says, well, go back up to your offices. Why don't you guys move over here to the WDI building, and I'll work with you. And you guys, I want you to come up with 10 ideas for 10 new shows for the Country Bear Jamboree. And we go, 10 ideas? Are you crazy? It's like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And he said, no, come up with 10 ideas, storyboard them all out, and pitch it to me, and then I'll pick which one I like. And I thought, oh, man, okay. So we spent an entire year doing all these illustrations and coming up with concepts and all these different ways of doing it. And he kept telling us we wanted to add the Christmas show as one of those 10. He kept saying, no, I don't want the Christmas show. I don't want that. And it makes me think that he just really wanted to be involved creatively and kind of drag this out, but I don't know. I mean, I also understand his point about, a show that lasts longer, that's worth spending the money on. But
right.
So we finally, after a year, we did all these shows. I had to do color illustrations of each character in their costume. And some of the shows were terrible. That didn't make sense. And some of them we really liked. And our favorite show was kind of the show about the Academy Awards or the Country Awards greatest hits, And that way we could use any country song that was out there, and they could all work in the show. So we had a really good selection of country songs, and that's the one we wanted. Well, we pitched all of them. Randy didn't like that one, right? But instead he goes, well, actually, he said, I like all 10 of them. I can't decide. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is Randy saying, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick one drawing from each of the 10 shows, and which he did. He pulled them off the board. He says, here, I want you to come up with a show with these 10 drawings, and come up with a home run name for this show, and have it ready by tomorrow, because tomorrow we're pitching it to Walt Disney World and Disneyland executives.
Oh, my gosh.
And I go, it's noon. We only have 4 hours to do this? What? So that's what we did. We went into my office, and Mike and I tried to hash it out and come up with a name and make sense of it. And we couldn't make sense of it at all. It was the worst of all the shows, we thought. But the artwork looked great, but they didn't go together. So the next day, all these executives showed up. They're all in a coat and tie. We'd never met them before, really. They knew who I was because of programming Epcot stuff. Anyway, they were there, and the whole room was full. There must have been 15, 20 executives there from every branch. And we pitched the show to them. I mostly did the pitching, and it didn't make any sense to me. But anyway, I tried, and nobody laughed. I mean, everybody was just like a still robot or something. Just no response, no reaction. And then one of the executives goes, well, this is real nice, and you guys did a really nice job, but what we're really looking for is a Christmas show. And we're like, our eyes just like dropped. Like, what? A Christmas show? It's like, and Brady jumps up and goes, hey, the guys have a Christmas show. They have it upstairs. I'll tell you what, why don't you guys, executives, all have lunch? And after lunch, the guys will run upstairs and get the Christmas show and pitch it to you. And that's what happened. We went upstairs and we got the show. We came down, we pitched it to them. And they all just cracked up laughing. They loved the show. They totally got into it. It was like a completely different crowd. And they go, we love it. They sold it right there. Everybody agreed to do it, Disneyland, Disney World. And it was sold. So then we had to go make it. And Randy was really proud of us. And we walked back to our offices thinking, oh my God, we wasted a whole year on this. It was ready to go a year ago.
Right.
How frustrating. But anyway, we still had our jobs. We were still working. So a lot of other people got laid off. So I guess in a way it was still good. But so then we had to build it.
Well, it shows your instincts were good right out of the gate, since the first thing you thought of was the thing that they wanted all along.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, Rick Rothschild gave us that advice. So
That's so funny. Well, how do you go putting together an update for a show like that that's already an established show? How do you go about that process?
well, we were kind of new at this, so we
Yeah.
kind of know, right? But we were really familiar with all the shows at Epcot in Tokyo, and we worked on all of them. So, and Mike and I had made animated films on our own, so we knew story. And Mike actually could storyboard and draw well, but I was a better artist, so he wanted me to do all the drawing. He was a better writer, and I wanted him to do the writing. So that worked out great. So we just started working on it and developing it. And surprisingly, everybody in the company wanted to work on a show with us because nobody had a job,
Right.
there wasn't anything going on. So suddenly we were helping to employ a whole bunch of people there.
Yeah.
So everybody suddenly liked us, and they'd want to have lunch with us and say, hey, can I get on your show? I need hours to put down on my timesheet. But then we brought in George Wilkins, who Mike and I really didn't know. I'd seen him, around the studio walking around, but we never worked with him really. And George turned out to be the most perfect guy for, the music end of it. He really knew the music, and he was doing all the music for Disney at Epcot for all the shows, all the background music and so forth. But this was a little different. This was, we had to create Country Bear songs, right? And a whole show together with music for everything. And we had to write some new songs. So, but as a team, we started working out pretty good. And they kept coming up with ideas and gags as I redid the illustrations and added gags in and costumes. And I had to illustrate all the costumes in color, and the costume people would come up and look at it, and we get feedback back and forth on how to do it. And the costume people, by the way, were fantastic at Disneyland. Wow. It's really impressive. They're so cooperative, so helpful. And you don't realize how bad you need them until you're actually working on a show. And you start running into all these kind of problems that can come up with a costume. Because animatronics can actually rip a costume apart and damage it really fast if you don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So costumes have, we would have to invent these corsets that would go in the elbow here or around the waist where the butyrate, they called it, or it's like a big plexiglass, clear plexiglass. That's a shell of the body. As the movements move, it's also moving those clothes, and the clothes can bind up inside the elbow or inside the wrist or around the stomach or the waist or underneath the armpit. So you had to make these little corsets, this little netting stuff to keep the clothes from going down deep inside and catching and tearing, as well as it would change the whole shape of the costume if you weren't careful.
That's interesting. Things like that, I would imagine, are things that people never really think of, but it takes a lot to go into even dressing the animatronics.
Yeah, we also had the fur on the bears as well. So the bears were fully covered with fur because the original show was all fur and there's very little costume. So when you add the fur and the costume, it adds a lot of weight. And as you add more weight, it restricts the movement of the functions as you try and animate it. So things can really look like they're really slowing down, and it's actually the weight and the restriction of the costume and the fur fighting against you. So you have to keep in mind how heavy that costume is, or if you're adding a prop, or if you're adding a guitar, what can happen, what it'll do. And because you have to make sure it lasts 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year or years.
Right.
And that's pretty hard to do. It's hard to even get a car to do that. So, yeah.
Well, how do you, at the time, I would imagine today programming multiple variations of a show would be much easier to swap in and out than it was back then. What was the process back then from a programming standpoint for swapping out a show like that?
Well, it had never been done before, so that was one problem. And that was one of the reasons they gave me the job, because I knew so much about animation and was really familiar with it. And we had the right department to do that, right, to figure that out. So the way Watha Rogers and Bill Justice, who were the animators on the original show, and Watha was my boss, and he was like the first person dealing with the animatronics back in the early days. They had programmed the first Bear show, but the tools they had were really limited. They had an Anacon like mine, a different color, but they didn't have the computer software like we had at that time. And for us, we had a big giant, what was called Big Blue. It was an IBM computer that took up a whole room. And they had to have it shipped in and with a crane, drop it down in the basement at Bear Band just for us to do the work.
Wow.
As well as we had to figure out how to then transfer the original Bear show so it can also be on DAX and be its own complete show. So it's trying to figure that all out. All those tools had to be switched over at some point. And we were also planning ahead for future Bear shows on how to do it. So, and all the trees and all the sets, all the props, some of the musical instruments, they all had to be swapped out. All the roll drops that rolled down in the background, they had to be swapped out for each show. And everything then had to be labeled so that you knew exactly where to put it back next year and exactly what went with what show. And we had to keep in mind, how can we use the same instruments or some of the same stuff from the first show to the second show, so we don't spend a lot of money and time trying to, reinvent it. So most of the instruments we kept the same.
Oh yeah, that would make sense. So, I remember when this happened, when this show came out, and it was, from an audience perspective at least, the audience loved it. It was a big hit. It's something people still talk about today. How'd the park feel about it? Was it a success with the park?
Yeah, I think so. I think the park really liked it. Puts you in the Christmas mood. And I think the Christmas show they liked better than the original show. Most people had already seen the original several times. Mm-hmm. So the Christmas show really kind of livened things up. It was a great idea to, promote the Christmas season, because that's when they get a lot of their fans and audience coming into the park. And there was something Christmassy to do rather than just see the Christmas parade.
Right.
Maintenance was a little worried, and we were concerned about, because there's a lot of work for them to swap things out. There's a few things that we did differently. Like Wendell, we gave him, instead of his little guitar instrument, we put a shotgun in his hand.
Right.
There's a whole different prop, but on top of that, there has to be wiring that goes up there to triggers a light and a little smoke effect, so it looks like his shotgun goes off. Things like that. So you had to swap that out, but yet make it work for both shows. And we had a penguin and an ice cube, and they kept getting on our case to say we wanted a animatronic penguin originally, where it actually moved. And Mike came up with this idea of, let's turn Shaker into a polar bear, and we'll just change out his fur, put on a white fur, and it'll all work. And then to make the gag and the joke there, let's put a little penguin next to him, and then Shaker would sing to the penguin. Well, they said, well, we're not going to let you have the money for a penguin. So we said, well, how about this? How about if we put the penguin in a block of ice, and you just give us one function, and then we'll just shake the penguin in the ice cube. They said, okay, you can have one function. So they let us have that. And actually, it was a funnier gag. I actually liked it better in the ice cube because it was just funnier.
Yeah.
And, but I remember that the Shaker as a polar bear, we thought it was a great idea. But then when we put show lights on him and I stood out in the audience, his fur looked terrible. He just looked really bright white. So I had to go get a can of light blue spray paint and paint shadows on the fur everywhere to try and tone him down so he didn't quite look too bright white, because it was just over the top. And then suddenly he looked like a polar bear again.
That's interesting.
Then Mike Sprout, he was always looking at my work, analyzing it for gags and stuff. And we would put clothes on, design clothes. In some cases, we would have a costume where it was just a shirt, but no pants. And Mike would go, it looks like he doesn't have pants on. It's like he's nude. It's like, we can't do that. He has no pants on. So a lot of costumes got switched over. So because of that whole pant problem where it looked like they were nude if you put a shirt and jacket on. So like Shaker, we switched his idea and we just put a scarf around him and then earmuffs to make it a little funnier. And that's why that got switched over. And besides, we wanted to see all white fur, the polar bear look. But I forgot the guy doing the fiddle, his name. He has a blue sweater on with deer on it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one of them that doesn't have pants. And I said, that's okay. His fiddle's in front of him so that people can't see that he doesn't have pants on. But it is, if you study it, you go, wait a second, he doesn't have pants on. What's going on here? So,
the things you have to take into consideration. There's a lot of it.
When we finished the Christmas show, we got all done and everything was edited. And the weird thing is Mike Sprout and I, we were the animators for the company. So we couldn't call up somebody else to do the animation. We were already writing and directing and creating the show. That was a full-time job, but we're the only animators available. So we had to animate it. And we already knew what we wanted. So we thought, no problem. We'll split it 50-50. You take 12 hours. I'll take the other 12-hour shift. We'll work 24 hours. And sometimes we only worked 8 hours, but that's how it worked. And I was still real busy doing art direction as the roll drops are being painted and the costumes were being made. I constantly had meetings with everybody on it. And they would bring the costumes in and they'd dress them and ask my opinion, and we'd have to make changes or add snaps or add corsets or little things to make sure everything worked right. As well as props. Sometimes you'd get a prop and we'd have to figure out a way to fasten it or attach it, or it didn't work with show lights, or we'd have to repaint it or do something different. But that was always going on. And then I would do my other shift of animating. So it was a 2-person job every day. But animation, we really knew what we were doing. We didn't really have a problem with that. But before we could start, we had to retune every single function of every single figure and make sure it's called the gain, the offset, and the stroke. And these are little adjustments to tune exactly the actuator, how far they can move left and right, what they call offset or stroke from one end to the other, and how fast they can go is the gain. And you want those tuned just right. It's like tuning a car, because if you don't tune it right and you go to animate, it won't play back correctly. And you're not going to get as much speed in motion, as well as the anatomy can look off. So that has to be done exactly correctly, but it's real time consuming. And I noticed that over the years, the old show got really off because some of the maintenance guys, some were good at it and some weren't, and some rushed and didn't tune it quite right. And they would get off. And when they're off, it makes the anatomy look off, or it makes the figure look like it's hardly moving, or it's going too slow and real sluggish. And that's because those cards are not tuned correctly, or maybe not working at all. The bears are hydraulic, most of the functions. And a few of the functions like eye blinks or something simple, fingers are pneumatic, which are air functions, which is 80 pounds of pressure, and it's 500 pounds of pressure for oil. But what happens is when you're dealing with oil figure, it's real easy for you to get an oil leak as you're programming. and you can cut a line, or you can and break a line or pop it off as you start animating and moving it. And I'm real picky about the animation, about the quality, and making sure everything's very exact, very lifelike, and get as much out of it as you can. But because I'm trying to get more out of it, it means there's a chance you're pulling on those oil cables and stretching them a little further than they meant to go in the past, and you can break one. And several times we broke lines, and you'd get, oil dripping all over the costume and the fur and all over the floor. You got to shut everything down. You got to call up the costume ladies to come out and take off the costume and the fur. Then you got to call maintenance to come take the whole figure apart, fix the function. And you got to call a costume to come back, put the fur back on, in a second backup costume on. And all the figures had backup costumes, sometimes 3. Just for this type of problem, if something tore or if there was oil leak. So we were constantly calling maintenance and the costume ladies for help. They didn't want us taking the costumes and fur off. They wanted to make sure they did it. So, that's their job. That's their area. It's kind of a union type thing, but, we didn't want to cross people's territory. But you ran into problems like that quite often. When we got all done with the show, it was all edited. It was all recorded, edited. Everything was all together. We're ready to program. And we had all the programming done, and we were ready to open the next day for the public. And so before we showed it to the public and have a grand opening, Marty Sklar and Randy Bright came down to look at it with a few other people and give us their opinion. They want to see the show all complete, which they should. That makes sense. But for some reason, after he showed the show, is out of nowhere, Randy Bright did not like Liver Lips. He didn't like Liver Lips was in a doing type of Elvis type Presley song, in a red Santa Claus type sequence outfit, and playing a Christmas tree guitar. And I designed this Christmas tree guitar because I didn't want a normal Fender guitar because it looked too brand new, and everybody who played guitar was, oh, that's just a Fender guitar they just bought it at the store. So I wanted to do something unique and different. So I had him turn it into a Christmas tree guitar, which nobody had seen before.
Right.
And just to make it another gag, make it a little funnier, just so people will laugh. Well, Randy didn't like it. And he says, well, you can't have an electric guitar because bears can't play electric guitar. They don't know how. So you can't have electric guitar. And we're going, wait a second. He was playing an acoustic guitar before on the old show. Big Al's playing an acoustic guitar. Henry's playing an acoustic guitar. The Five Bear Rugs are all playing instruments. Like, come on. Yes, but this is an electric guitar. They can't play electric guitars. I said, Randy, I play guitar. It's the same thing. It's the same chords. It's exactly the same way. Well, anyway, we argued about it. And this is one of the things about creativity is like we have creative ideas. And sometimes you run in butt heads with ideas. And sometimes you wonder, like, what is it do they really not like? And what's the issue here? Because every now and then you just run with creative decisions that people just don't agree upon. And this was one of them. Well, Marty, fortunately, was there. And Marty was on our side, we could tell, because he liked it. So Marty goes, hey, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's bring in a whole group of audience for the first time to see the show. And we'll bring them in right now, watch the show. And I'll ask them afterwards, what they liked about the show. And if they don't like that electric guitar, we'll take it out. But if they do like it, we'll keep it, right? So we brought in a real audience, our first time with an audience, and we're all sitting there kind of nervous watching it. And people are laughing in the right place. They're really enjoying it. They're getting into it. And they're just really enjoying the show. And then afterwards, Marty asked them, well, what was your favorite thing about the show? And several people said, oh, we love the Elvis character with the Christmas tree guitar. Oh, that was awesome. We loved that. That was our best figure. That they really liked it. And that was all they talked about. They didn't talk about any of the other bears. And Marty goes, well, there you go. Guitar staying. And the audience didn't understand what was going on. But anyway, so Randy got really mad. He kind of bounced out of the theater. He didn't talk to us for a while. And we got to keep the guitar. So.
And it's funny because that guitar is one of the memorable. I know now whenever the Archives has a show, they always have one of those guitars that they took out of Disneyland, and they'll have that guitar on display. And whenever they have some sort of fan event or something, so the guitar obviously stuck around.
Well, that's good. I mean, maybe we can get Paul McCartney or somebody to sign it. I don't know.
That'd be good. It's so funny to find yourself having an argument over whether or not the singing talking bears could play an electric guitar. Those are conversations you don't have every day.
We ran into stuff like that quite often. I mean, it just, one of the things you learn directing and being involved in a show like this, the crew's building the props and the roll drops and things like that. Normally we got along great. Exitencio and Sam McKinn helped us. I had way too much on my plate besides animating. I had to do all this artwork and create everything. So I didn't have time to do real finished full color illustrations for the roll drops or for the slideshow. So what I did is I would just do a pencil sketch and say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's the story. And I'd go over it with Mike and we brainstorm back and forth. And then Marty said, hey, why don't you have Exitencio do finished drawings of this because you don't have time. And he had done the original show slideshow. So he already knew how to do it. And have Sam McKinn do the roll drops, as well as a painting of what the sets look like. I said, okay, that works great for me. So, and they sat right next to me in the office next door, so it was almost easy. I could just yell out my door, hey, Sam, come over here a second. I need you to do this. And so they did a fantastic job. I thought, oh my God, these guys draw so much better than me. It's like, oh, this is embarrassing. They were so good. And, they didn't complain anything. They just looked at my goofy pencil drawings and said, yeah, I think I understand what you want. And they would go do it. And they would just make me look terrible in comparison. They were just so good, both of them.
Yeah, it's hard to beat those guys. So they were good to work with then.
Yeah, and they're just smiling and happy and just no problem. And we used them on the vacation show too because of it. The only problem I ran into is sometimes we'd run into a problem. Like I remember the trees sometimes didn't fit. We're trying to put them where the original trees were because the trees were a different shape because the Christmas one had snow on it. We couldn't use the previous trees, and we wanted something different to feel like Christmas. And the vacation show had a different type of tree, and we realized they bumped into the stage, with the stage rolling in and out, and we had to cut some of it off. And I went to tell Sam, hey, I got to take this out of the drawing. And he got really mad at me. He's like, well, wait, the drawing's all done. It's like, no, you don't understand. The stage hits it. I can't fit it in. I got to cut some of it off. But then I thought, why am I taking out the drawing? I'll just tell him, just cut it off right here. This is
yeah, right.
I don't need to have him redraw the painting. How stupid of me. So I just told him, no, never mind. You don't have to do it. I'll just tell him.
So he did the backdrops, and you said X did the slides when they had the little slideshow thing?
Right. Yeah, he did all the slides. And wow.
Those were so much fun.
Those are really well done. And he really plussed it. But I remember we were doing the roll drop for Wendell that has the moose on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it originally didn't have a moose in it. And I first did a sketch and with the ice breaking. So the story of the song is that he fell in the ice, right? And Mike came, typical Mike, he was always looking for gags to do. And he says, hey man, why don't you just put a moose in there that's all frozen, covered in snow? And I said, well, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And so I had to redo the drawing, and I put this moose in. He goes, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. So they then did a full color painting of it. Sam did, I think it was. And then from that, they took it down to Paramount Studios, and they actually blew it up, on as a big roll drop. And then I'd have to go over and art direct it. It's weird that they would take a little painting that's only, 2 feet wide, and they blow it up into this giant roll drop that came out of the screen, out of the ceiling, and yet it was exactly the same.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun to see those being created. Yeah, Mike Sprout was just always looking for gags, something funny, So he was really good at that and just spotting little things. And it might be the lyrics, rewriting the lyrics. And other times it's just, with Rufus was one of the best examples of coming up with gags. Because, again, we couldn't have any money for a new character. And we both came up with this idea of Rufus, and we were playing around with it. And working in animatronics, you're always looking for ways to get free animation. And what I mean by free, that's what we called it. It could be just, the girls holding a sleigh bell, and the sleigh bell just rocks back and forth freely. Mm-hmm. That's free animation. You don't have an actuator moving it. It's just their hand. Or, one of the characters has a scarf on him, or something's hanging down from his hat, and his hat is moving around. But with Rufus, we're going to do free animation by doing it all with sound effects. And all we had to do was add a few speakers up where the lighting was up above the audience. So we could create this traveling sound, and we would just do sound effects of Rufus in the dark, pounding his feet down and moaning and grunting as he acted like this bear trying to take care of the lighting. And it worked really well. And the audience, was like, felt like Rufus was really above you, really working, because you could hear him. And then we continued that on with Wendell and his shotgun. And when he shot his shotgun, we then had it ricochet all around the room, triggering off different speakers in the room. So it felt like it, ricocheted off different lights and things like that. And we did that in his song. And we made it even a bigger effect with sound, breaking glass and all kinds of things in the finale. So, that was a great way to just get free stuff out of it.
Yeah. Well, Rufus was so much fun. I remember at the time as a kid, it kind of grew the universe of the show, if that makes any sense. It just kind of expanded it beyond just what was happening on stage, made it feel like this was a real world they had going on there backstage, all these characters and everything. I always thought it was a really fun addition.
One little trick we had with Rufus is that another gag Mike came up with is the light came on Big Al instead of Henry. Mm-hmm. Rufus messed up, right?
Right.
But I learned, I was programming that light, and I came up with this light effect where the light actually animates, and you could animate it. But if you watch it, sometimes the slide will kind of grow and then shrink down, rather than just be a light turning on and off. And then we realized, that's pretty cool. We added this buzz sound as if it was like almost electrical short to the light effect on top of it. So it was like an old-fashioned light, buzzing out, crying out. It was a nice little effect. I don't know if people catch that because it's so subtle. And then the light switches over to Henry and continue on with the show. But we were always looking for little tiny things like that just to plus it.
Well, I think that came across in the show that there's so many gags that, aside from what was in the songs, what was in the dialogue, stuff in the backgrounds, like you were talking about, stuff in the decorations of the theater, like how you decorated the heads on the wall, that was always fun.
I got a little story about the heads, by the way, is we put those lights on, right? And the Christmas lights and this whole decoration, we were trying to make it funny is when you looked up there, with the deer with a red nose light bulb. Mm-hmm. And Melvin being this stupid, moose. But we realized that the lights aren't plugged in. And I thought, well, that just looks weird. It's like, how are the lights working when they're not plugged in? And so I had to have the prop department go over and make a phony light socket, and we glued it onto the wall as if it really existed. But we had to make it much bigger than normal so that it would read to the audience. Then we ran the cord over there and made it look like it was plugged into it, but it actually isn't a real light socket. And it's just a little tiny little thing that I don't know if people even noticed or caught it, but it looked really wrong when there wasn't one there. But as soon as you put it on the wall and plugged it in, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the things you would notice if it wasn't there, but it just feels right. That's funny. Well, did you have any other favorite bits from that show?
George Wilkins was our musician, and he was so really good. But what was amazing working with him is he was still living in the 60s the whole time we were working with him. He just had the vibe and all the lingo of the 60s. He would say groovy all the time and hip. And I can't remember all the 60s words he used, but that's all he would say. And you could really recognize it all the time. Oh yeah, man, that's really hip. That's really groovy. And he'd always respond with these really funky 60s sound words. It's like he hadn't grown out of it. He hadn't moved to the 80s yet. But it was hilarious. And we just loved being around him, just hearing all those, silly comments he came up with. But when we got onto the vacation show and we were really depressed that we didn't want to do the vacation show.
Oh, yeah.
And George came into my office, and it's like, Mike and I were really down. We didn't want to work on it. He goes, come on. And he got all fired up. So like, come on, guys, we'll make it work. We'll find a way. We'll make it work. And he just kept saying that. It's like he didn't want to give up, but Mike and I did. And he talked us into it.
Well, why didn't you want to do the vacation show?
I don't know if it was a good story or not. I might go to Disney jail for this, but Mike and I were really burnt out after the first show. And part of it was because we had to create the show, but then we had to animate the show and do night shift and day shift. But then we had to do the second show at Disneyland and work on that for a couple weeks because all of that had to fit, all the costumes. We had to retune all the figures. We had to make sure the roll drops are in and everything worked properly. And we had a few conflicts where the bears didn't quite sync up right. They didn't work exactly the same, so we had to work around it so they ran off the same program. And then from there, we had to fly to Florida and do the show there and spend several weeks, setting up there. And then we had to go to Tokyo and install it in Tokyo. So we were just so burnt out on bears. We just didn't want to do anymore. And we came back to California. We needed a vacation, get away. And we come back to the office and Randy calls us down to his office and say, you guys did a home run. That was a great show. Everybody loves a Christmas show. It was fantastic. I want you to do another show, get to work on it. And I go, well, what do you mean another show? We're done. It's like, no, you guys, we got another show. So we know they'll buy it. They'll give us some money, come up with shows that'll last for 6 months. But this time I want you to come up with 10 ideas and 10 different ways to do another show that's last 6 months. And I go, 10 more shows. Oh my God. He says, don't worry, I'll just pick which one I want. And it's like he pulled this on us before on the Christmas show, 10 shows. So we did not want to do it. I mean, Mike and I, we had to keep our job and that would keep us employed, but we just didn't want to work on bears anymore. We were fed up with it. And it was George Wilkins who kept trying to talk us into it. George wanted to keep going. But George wanted to keep his job too because he didn't have any other work. So he kept saying, yeah, come on, guys, we'll make it work. Come on, I was like, so we worked on 10 more shows, right? And we had to then put all these shows together. I had to do all this artwork and full color illustrations of all the characters. I didn't storyboard and do as much storyboarding this time. I just basically did nice watercolors of each character. And and I learned my mistake on the Christmas show compared to the vacation show is that when I was doing the Christmas show, I was using photographs of the bear that I took as reference to draw from. And I didn't even know that I could go down to the morgue, just down the stairs over to the morgue and check out the original Mark Davis drawings for free and just use them at my desk as a reference to go by. And it's like, nobody told me I could do that. And somebody had mentioned it to me, yeah, just go down there and check them out. And, it's like, you don't have to go to Disneyland and take more pictures. And once I checked out his original artwork, I got a much better idea what Mark Davis was going for, and I could use that. So my anatomy of the bears got a lot better. My drawings got better of it. And we came up with all these ideas, but we couldn't come up with 10 good ideas. We just came up with like a couple bad ideas and thought, well, these are so bad, he'll never go for them. So, we'll just put these on our bad list and we'll have a couple good lists. And so we pitched them all to him and all the ideas. And Randy, it came to the point where I think the last show or one of the last shows was the vacation show that we pitched. And Randy goes, vacation show, everybody's on vacation. That's a great title. That's a home run. That's exactly what I want. And go, oh no, that's our worst idea. We don't want to do that. We go, look, Randy, there are no songs about vacation. Nobody writes a country song about vacation. There's zero. You have nothing to go on. He goes, no, you're wrong. Everyone's on vacation when they go to Disneyland. They will love it. It's the perfect title. So he forced us to do that, and we were stuck with it. And we did not want to do it. And then George Wilkins comes back and, come on, guys, hang in there. We can do it. We'll make it work. George is like trying to save the day for us. But anyway, we were forced to do it, and that's what happened.
Well, and it happened. You got it done.
Yeah, somehow. I think we hated each other by the end, or we just hated bears. It's just too many bear shows.
Too many bear shows in a row, not to mention the ones that never got built.
Yeah, I don't know where all that artwork is, but it probably takes up half the morgue.
Well, what other shows were you contemplating? What other things were you thinking about doing?
Well, the one show we just liked a lot was the one where it was an award show for the best country hits, and we could make it look like we're giving awards out to the Bears. And I guess Academy Awards isn't the right word, but it's Best Country Music Awards or something like that. Then we would have the whole library of all the country songs. And that was one of the problems we kept running into. On Vacation Show, we didn't have country songs that would fit. And that's why we ended up with, the Beach Boys song and Singing in the Rain and some other stuff. And those are good songs and stuff, but it took it way out of the country realm. And we also had Randy then started putting his 2 cents in what songs he wanted and how he wanted the show. So he got like too many directors.
Yeah.
It kind of interfered a lot. I think it worked much better when just Mike and I and George did it and went on our own belief of what was best.
It's interesting you say that, because we've talked in the past on the show about the Vacation Show, and talked a bit about how it's noticeable that it has more sort of pop songs, more, like you said, Singing in the Rain, the Beach Boys, things like that. I'd never thought about the fact that it's really because there aren't a lot of country songs. I mean, you had On the Road Again, which was a good one. But there aren't a lot of country songs you could pull from, I suppose, for that theme.
There wasn't. We really struggled, just constant listening to different country songs. We were buying all these records. We were going through albums and going through it. And neither of us were big country fans. I started becoming one the more I got into this. But I would love to do the show over today with all the country songs available today to us, because the quality of the songs is so fantastic right now, and you would be able to do a really good country song or a country bear show with today's songs. But yeah, we were just stuck. It was just not a good theme, and trying to stick to that theme made it really difficult.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, I sometimes I suggested songs and they just didn't fit, but I kind of like, I don't care. It's like we got to get a song in here. It's like we got to find something, and yeah. So a lot of times we butt heads over the music for that, and it created a lot of conflict internally.
But it's funny, that show is still memorable for a lot of people, and it still runs over in Tokyo.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the shows for a long time. I guess it's out at Disneyland, right?
Yeah, it's out at Disneyland. Yeah. And Disney World runs the original show still, but over in Tokyo they run all three of them.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
and they look great.
Well, that's good. There's a couple things that were kind of interesting. Is the three girls who I really liked, and I did the programming for the Christmas show on both shows.
Mm-hmm.
Three girls, just because I could do a lot more, and I didn't like what Waithel and Bill Justice did, because what they did is they just copied the animation into all three, just copy and paste. So they did exactly the same thing in the original show, which with the tools they had, that probably made sense. But with the new big blue computer and the software that we had, I could program them individually and make them interact and turn and play to the audience a lot better. But I remember we arguing with the costume ladies a little bit about the length of their outfits, on how high I could raise it up. Because I realized the higher I raised it up, the cuter they look. But there was a fine line. It's like, well, Dave, I think you're showing too much. That's inappropriate. So we were fighting little issues that you just don't think about. You go, well, wait a second, these are just bears. Like, they didn't have any clothes on in the other shows. Like, why are we making a big deal? Because now they're wearing clothes.
Right.
But wow, we really got in a long conversation with these three cute little girls, how high I could raise their skirt. So
again, the type of conversations you don't have every day in a regular job. No. How short can the skirt on this bear be?
Yeah, and Teddy Bear she was for the vacation show or the Christmas show, we decided to put her on a ski lift, make it look like a ski lift, right? And because it was just perfect situation. And then we put skis on her, little ski outfit and stuff, and made her real cute. And then Mike came up with the idea of, let's just break her leg and put a cast on her leg, and then have all the bears sign it. So another gag Mike came up with that just was funny and silly, but it just added to it. But she was, you always had to not lose their original personalities from the original show. Mm-hmm. She's this, pretty bear that's very beautiful singer, very sweet and adorable, and you had to keep that. But you still wanted to come up with something a little funny just to make the audience laugh. So on every scene or every bear, you look for little things that you could put in there. With Shaker having the penguin, mm-hmm. Her with the cast, and Big Al. I didn't have any idea what to do costume for Big Al. I'd done all the other bears, and he was like my last bear to illustrate. And I couldn't come up with any ideas. And I tried a few things, and nothing worked. I didn't like it. And then Mike came in one day and he says, "Oh, I got it. Let's make him, the New Year's Eve baby. And we'll put him in a big giant diaper." And I go, "Mike, that's a really stupid idea. No, I'm not going to do that." And he would leave, and then he'd come back in that afternoon or the next day. He says, "I got this idea. Let's have Big Al, as a New Year's baby in a big diaper." I go, "Mike, you just told me that idea yesterday." He goes, "No, I think it'll work. It's like, sketch it up." And so I finally gave up and I listened to him and I did a sketch of it and colored it all in. And I hated drawing it. I didn't like it. And then we showed it to Randy. We showed it to all people at work. It's like everybody liked it but me. Everybody liked it. And they liked the song. And George liked the song as the only person who didn't like it. So we kept it, because nobody complained about it and it stayed in the show. But anyway, I was the one fighting against it. When we were first doing the show and we ran the Christmas show, the music track in there and so forth, and we're setting things up while we were programming, we suddenly realized that the speaker system in there was awful. We didn't even dawn on us when we were creating the show that, wow, the sound quality is really bad in here. It's like, what kind of speakers are they using? And the coverings for the speaker were so covered with paint that they muffled all the sound because they put this type of scrim over the speaker and then painted it to do some detail because you had to hide the speaker. And so our audio guy came down and he says, he was like, oh my God, this is really bad. Like, we got to do something. So we said, hey, man, whatever you got to do, just figure it out. So he bought all new speakers, I think, for the whole show. And then he was adding all the speakers for Rufus up on where the lighting area was and around the room. So it sounded like a circular theater as he traveled and ran up and down. But we had to improve the speakers for like the three girls and the characters singing in the fiber rugs because they just sound too muffled. And so a lot of that all got swapped out during the Christmas show. And they just, used it for all the shows. But I never would have known that we needed new speakers. So that got added to the budget like afterwards.
Right.
And Jack was like shook his head, Jack Taylor, who was he was our manager, but we made him our producer too. Mm-hmm. And it was his suggestion. He says, well, if I'm watching you guys and taking care of you, why don't you just make me the producer and I'll go to all the meetings and do all the paperwork and you guys don't have to deal with all that, right? And he said, great, you do that. Take care of it for us, because we didn't want to go to those meetings and we didn't want to have to like deal with budgets and stuff. So then he would have to go in and we tell him we need money for speakers. He'd have to go in. But I could tell his look on his face like, oh, I got to go back in and ask for more money, And but he would get it for us. So he didn't let us down.
You mentioned that you did the installation of the Japanese the shows in Japan as well. And one thing I've noticed in watching those on YouTube is that the shows aren't exactly the same. There are some differences in songs, some are in Japanese, some are in English, and some are like different numbers entirely. Was that something that you guys did, or like who did the localization of that?
That's a good point. They wanted that. Mm-hmm. And that was all their request. I think their penguin actually isn't in an ice cube. I think theirs was animated. They actually made an animated penguin. Mm-hmm. And they didn't understand the gag. Some of the gags they don't understand. And they didn't understand that gag of being in an ice cube. It wasn't funny to them. And so that got cut and they actually just made an animated penguin. They said, we'll spend the money. And then they also said, look, we like certain songs that we want that Japanese people like to sing along to. And for both shows, Vacation Show 2, they requested that we change some songs just because they wanted to sing along to it. Songs that were well known in Japan more than they were well known in America. So that's how that happened. And we kind of didn't care. We didn't understand their world that well. And we weren't going to fight it. So, yeah, sure, it makes sense. So we would change it.
I've noticed some aside from the song, some differences in the animatronics, like the penguin, like you said, and also in the Vacation Show, there's a scene with an octopus where the bear's in love with the octopus, and their octopus is a little more animated. It's kind of a differently styled octopus than the one in the American show.
Yeah, the same problem is they didn't like the one we had, but again, what happened is the vacation show with Octopus, we couldn't we couldn't we couldn't have a new figure, but we did make an octopus as a somewhat new figure. But all we could have was one digital function wiggling it.
Mm-hmm.
And we used the same control that the penguin had wiggling it for the octopus. It was the same signal. And the cards usually have 8 digital functions on it, and there are usually a lot of extra spare ones. So that was always easy. You didn't have to have a new card. You didn't have to have new wiring. There are already 8 additional functions on a card that you could choose for many of those. So that wasn't that big of a deal to add digital functions. But you couldn't add analog, and you couldn't build, a whole animatronic. So that octopus, I can't remember. I think it came out of the submarine ride or something like that. And we just repainted it. And the octopus's name is Dolores, and that was the name of our secretary. And Mike wanted to donate the octopus's name to Dolores because we really liked her. She was a really good secretary. And so that's how Dolores got her name. Because they actually mentioned that, Shaker does in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I originally wanted the song, what's it called? Under the Sea by Bobby Darin, I think. That's
Beyond the Sea.
Or Beyond the Sea, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the song that I wanted for that. And Mike and George wouldn't go for it.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, that would have been perfect for it. But that's where we butted heads. It was that one song, I'll tell you. I really tried to get that in there. Because it was a really popular, well-known song, and it kind of fit with the whole sea thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the boat scene and the octopus. The logs on the vacation show came later. And that was a scene that I added. And I actually didn't think they would go for it. And if you ever go to the morgue and look at the illustration I did, they turned it into a poster that they sold for a while. And I don't think they sell it anymore. But in the poster shows the logs there. But when I painted it, I first painted the 5 bear rugs. And I spent like 2 or 3 weeks on it trying to get this painting right. And I was only doing the painting for the costume ladies, exactly how the costumes. And I was using Mark Davis's bear drawings as a reference because I thought, I'm just doing this painting for, the costume ladies. Nobody else is going to see it. Or and they just want to know what the props were, what the costume was. And I didn't want to do different poses for the bears. They just want to get it done. But it was all watercolor, it had to be finished. So I finished it. And then came the suggestion of, why don't we put logs and turn it into a raft? And because they're supposed to be on a river, and make it look like this river raft. And then I realized it was a great suggestion, but I didn't want to do this drawing over. It would take me 3 weeks just to add these logs. So I put cellophane over it. And I painted on the back of the cellophane like they do in the old animation technique, or how they would do multiplane on glass, and they would paint on glass. And I did it that way, and then tape the cellophane on so that you could see the artwork either way, with the logs or without. And everybody liked the logs, so the cellophane stayed and the logs stayed into the show. But what happened is I noticed that the Christmas show and the vacation show, in the original show, they actually just kept the logs on. They didn't take them off. They just liked them. Mm-hmm. And I never requested that. And it's just like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. I wasn't going to fight it, but less work for maintenance.
Yeah, and they're still there today, as far as I know. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that's where they came from.
Yeah. There was the little teddy bear kid on the vacation show.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just there for cuteness for the audience and the little kids, I guess. But I had come up with this idea of fireflies. And when I first worked at Disney, they sent me down to work at Pirates of the Caribbean to replace some of the fireflies in Pirates of the Caribbean. That was one of my first jobs.
Wow.
And Mark Miller started teaching me how to make fireflies for pirates. And so I had to make all these fireflies, and we went down there and we replaced them because every now and then I guess they break, or because they're running constantly, I guess the wire breaks on them. You have to replace them. So when I learned how to do that, I came up with this idea. It's like, why don't we put fireflies in a glass jar as if this little kid caught all these fireflies? And I wanted to go to the special effects department and ask them if they would create this. Well, they laid off all the effects guys, so there weren't any left, after Epcot. So I just invented it myself because I kind of already knew how to make them. But nobody ever thought of putting them inside of a jar. And then inside is a fan that blows them around inside the jar. And the fan is actually underneath, blowing up into the jar from the bottom.
Again, it's just the little details that make those shows so fun. Details like that.
Wendell's with a shotgun originally had a normal straight shotgun. And I think it was Mike or somebody, we were having a meeting on it. And they go, oh my God, that's a real gun. You can't have a real gun in the show. And we thought, yeah, okay, we never thought of that. It was like, he's holding a real gun, and the gun is going to be shot, and there's going to be a light effect in it, and he's going to, pull back, and you're going to have the sound effect like a real shotgun. Like, people are going to run out of the theater. They're going to be scared to death. Like somebody shooting up the theaters. Like, he can't do that. I thought, oh, the little things you got to think about,
Right.
And this was one of them. It's like, oh, how are we going to solve this? And Mike goes, I know. Let's take the barrel and we'll just twist it around and make like it's all deformed, so that it'll just like a stupid, messed up red deck shotgun of some type. And I said, that's a great idea. So I redrew it. And when we went to go make it, I just said, yeah, just twist and bend these barrels around and just deform them. So it couldn't possibly ever work. And that's why we had to do it, because we didn't want people running out of the theater thinking someone was really shooting a gun.
Right.
So, but it just added another gag to it. So,
yeah, it made it feel more cartoony for sure.
We had a really hard time finding voices for the girls and some of the characters. And you don't realize this, that George was really good. George Wilkins was fantastic getting all the musicians. And he found all of them. He had a whole network of musicians. But he had problems with some of them because some of them didn't read music, but they were excellent at playing. And George was like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, I'll just play it for you and you just listen and, Oh, wow. But so, I think one of the guys quit because he didn't know how to read the music sheets, he was telling me. And he was a really good fiddle player or something like that. It's like, no, get him back. We need him. But we ran into those kind of conflicts because you're not used to like pulling a fiddle player out. That's, Southern cowboy of some type that really knows how to play the fiddle, but he doesn't know how to read music. So you kind of like ran into these little tiny problems of how to get around it. But we had problems with the voices where we had a whole list of people that tried out for the job as the voices of the bears, but some of them sang like opera singers, and they just did not fit. I mean, their voices were beautiful. They were crystal clear. They just didn't sound like a bear. They sounded like an opera singer or something. And then you had other people that sang like a rock and roll star, but they didn't fit a bear. So we were always fighting that. It's like, this has got to be Trixie, or this has got to be Teddy Bear, or this has got to be the three girls. And I remember one girl, we had very pretty girl that she was a really good singer and a professional singer, and she did a great job, but her voice just did not, we would record her voice and then put it with a picture of the bear and go, no, doesn't fit. That doesn't sound like a bear.
Right.
And we had to cut her, and she was really upset that we cut her out of the show, but it was just one of those things. And sometimes we got people who weren't as good of a singer to do the character just because their voice had such a personality that just sounded like a bear. Right. But then we struggled with them singing. So it went both ways. And we found for the three little girls, I remember we found this group of three girls that they actually were a group that were together. And I went to watch them play on stage somewhere, and they're really good, but they kind of did their own thing, their own style of music that would never fit with the Disney thing. But we brought them into the studio and asked them to sing, the songs of the three girls. They fit perfectly. They had such weird, different personalities that they just fit, and it was like spot on, perfect. You just never would imagine it. It just, if you look at them, you say, no, that can't be the three girls. That's not right. But then you record their voices and lay down the track and listen to it with the image of the three girls, and you go, oh, wow, that's perfect.
It worked. Yeah.
Them. Oh, Mike and I had this problem with Gomer at the piano. Gomer his hands can get caught on the piano keys real easy. And it wasn't a good design, and I don't know how they could have improved the design, because he's got to, look like he's playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't change the piano with solid wood, but the problem was if he got his hands caught underneath the keys, and then he raised his hands up, he would actually break his wrist. And sometimes he'd break a oil line or a transducer line or things like that inside his wrist. And then you'd have to call maintenance over. They'd have to take it all apart and fix it. It would take hours or all day to fix it. And then maintenance would be mad at you for a week. So, after we broke it a few times, we just got, we got to come up with a better solution. And so I finally realized that if I just unbolt the piano and take it off the stage and just set it over there out of the way, I program Gomer and get it just right. And I would put tape or cardboard where the piano was. So if he hit the cardboard or tape, it wouldn't matter if he broke that,
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got the programming done, then I would just put the piano back. But one day I did that. The programming was done. We slid the piano back in there. And a costume lady had to change the costume, was working on the costume, something about it. And it was real minor, but she was standing right next to it. And I forget what I did, but I ran the figure, did something wrong. And the piano, we hadn't bolted it back down because we were so used to unbolting it, taking it off the stage and putting it back on and getting it out of the way. And I ran it, and all of a sudden Gomer picked up the piano and threw it like a couple feet. And she screamed and jumped off the stage and looked at me like, what are you doing to me? It's like, don't ever do that again. It's like, God. And I screwed up big time that day. And then Mike was telling me a story when he was working on the Bears in Tokyo. He was doing Gomer. And he did the same thing as he threw the piano out of the way, just pushed it off.
It's a real rock and roll moment for Gomer.
Yeah, I
He's
guess
trashed
so.
his instrument.
We both had that problem. He would tell me that, Dave, I would have nightmares because we'd be around these bears every day, around the clock. He says, I'd go to sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I'd be dreaming about bears, bears on my sleep. And I told him, I kind of have the same problem, but my problem is I keep hearing the same song all day and all night. And it just keeps playing in my head because I'd be sitting there programming that same song over and over and over, like the Three Girls song. And it's like, because it took me several days to just program that one scene. I just couldn't get the song out of my head. It wouldn't stop playing. And really irritating, But I always had that problem on every show that I worked on. You'd hear the soundtrack over and over, and then it just wouldn't stop playing in your head, the soundtrack.
I would imagine the amount of times you had to go over that, I would imagine it would stick in there pretty good because they're catchy songs to begin with, but then to listen to them all day over and over again.
Henry's head was really heavy, and that hat that he wears, it's even heavier. And because of that, it was hard to punctuate a head nod move on certain syllables and things like that. But when you put the raccoon on his head, it became way too heavy. And it was just a constant fight and struggle with that raccoon. You could hardly move the head at all on Henry on that one figure because the raccoon was just so heavy. The raccoon you could move around really well. And I guess on one of the other shows, we switched him into a skunk just for fun and just for more gags. But man, that was tough to work with. You wouldn't think it, but it's just one of those problems that you have of just too much weight. If that was all electric motors today in compliance, it'd probably be no problem, and you could handle all of it, and it would look fantastic. And I remember George Wilkins was complaining about, because he was real in tune with the music all the time, right? And the beat. And he wanted to see the bears keep the beat, right? But the problem is the bears just couldn't move that fast. So you couldn't like tap their foot right to the beat, but they couldn't tap their foot that fast. So it'd be more like this. And it was really frustrating to him. And he would tease me about it, but I understood where he's coming from. But you had to go with what you had to live with, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. They can only do so much.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of things at the start that I hadn't realized you worked on. One was the DAC show at Epcot. I guess it was the Astuder Computer Review. Was that the one?
Yeah, I hated it.
You didn't like that one?
No, I really disliked it. It was so boring, and the whole control mechanism of moving this little TV set on a track did not work very well. I was struggling with it. And I would get it all programmed looking what I would spend all day on it. I'd come in the next day and it wouldn't work the same. It was really frustrating. And the people, Rick Rothschild, I think, was directing me on it. And to me, it was a really boring show, not that great. I mean, I understand why they did it, and you want to show off DAX and Central and all of that. But I'd much rather play with dinosaurs or bears or something, you know?
Yeah.
The one good thing about that working on that show, I didn't have anybody coming in bugging me saying, I want to see the show. Nobody, no construction workers, no pretty girls, nobody came in ever. I was always by myself and thinking, oh God, not this boring thing again.
Well, I guess your instincts were right, because that was the shortest lived thing in the park. That was gone in like 6 months or something like that. It didn't last long at all.
I can see why. Yeah. And then the other show in Tokyo, I forget what they call it. It's like Hall of Presidents.
The Meet the World show.
Yeah, Meet the World. And they had these two young kids with a crane that were talking, and then they'd have these. I apologize if I say it wrong. I guess they're leaders or emperors or whatever of different time periods that would come up, kind of like Hall of Presidents. And kids would interact with them, but it was all in Japanese. So for me, I just didn't understand it. I couldn't, even though I had an interpreter and we'd write it down, they would explain it, and we pre-programmed it to Tonga building. To me, it was really boring. And again, I didn't like it. And it was just too boring and really slow. To my surprise, the Japanese didn't like it either. They thought it was too boring and too slow too. And they took the show out.
Oh, really?
For a while. So it didn't last long. And people didn't go to it. It was always an empty theater. And that was my first time being in Japan working. And they didn't give me a technical support person for some reason. They just sent me by myself, and I was supposed to just have the Japanese staff repair anything. And they were really good about it, and it worked out fine. It weren't a problem. But I think it was Claude Coates was the director on it. And Claude Coates was always showing up in a limousine with a limousine driver, this pocket limousine. And he'd show up at lunchtime, and want to see the show. And then he would leave for 2 hour, 3 hour lunch, and then he might come back, or I may not see him till the next day. It's like, that was his whole job. I thought, God, I want a job like that. A limousine driver and driving me around. But where's my limousine driver? And that really got to me for a long time when I was on it. And anyway, it wasn't fun for me.
Yeah.
You know?
So you never programmed that show in English? Because I know that at one point they wanted to bring it to Epcot, but so you never programmed it in English, only in Japanese?
I think it was only Japanese. Yeah. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was all Japanese.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I was just not paying attention to sleep the whole time I was there. I don't know.
Well, you didn't have the limousine, so. Well, much later, you worked on some other Epcot shows well after opening, some of which are have pretty big followings today. Did you work on Cranium Command?
Doug Griffith mostly did that. I did have to go over there and work a couple days to help out for some reason, whether Doug was sick or there's some issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did a little bit of work on it. But yeah, it was mostly Doug's. It was a cool show and really great show. Well written. Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Yeah, I wish I had done the whole thing, but I was busy doing other stuff.
Right. Well, another one you did, which is an interesting case, was Food Rocks, right?
Yes and no. Doug did most of Food Rocks. I'm sorry. There 2 Food Rocks. I was over there programming on it. I think we split it 50-50 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what worked. I didn't like that show. The characters were just too limited. They didn't put enough functions in. They were really, on their case about the budget, so they cut a lot of functions out that they should have put in. So I didn't have good animation. I couldn't get good animation. I couldn't get good control. I think if they put the money into it, the animation, I think it would have been just a fantastic show. But I think it was just too many budget cuts.
That's an interesting point, because that's a show. I know that there are a lot of people who really love that show, but as somebody, like, I had been a big fan of Kitchen Cabaret, which had been there before, and Food Rocks felt way less complicated technically than Kitchen Cabaret had been. And I think it goes to a lot of what you said,
Well,
much
that's right.
simpler figures.
Doug did Kitchen Cabaret, and I guess I did Food Rocks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Doug was helping me on Food Rocks a little bit. I don't think I did 100% of it. But I was surprised, they redid it. I forget who the director was. Was it Willie Crump?
I think he was in on it, yeah.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And but I didn't have much say-so in it. I wish I was involved in the very beginning of it, where I had say-so as for what the function should be and how they should have done it. And they didn't bring me in early enough. And usually, if they bring me early and I'm able to put my 2 cents in exactly how to build a figure, what functions you need, and how to stage it, how to set things up, and it makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just really improves it. It's like, you would want Mark Davis coming in and making sure that everything is staged correctly, or Waithel Rogers to come in and make sure you have all the right functions in.
Absolutely.
But after Epcot, they kind of didn't put me in that Waithel Rogers role for a while. And it was Tony Baxter eventually complained to management and said they wanted to be in that role as chief animation producer and going through and checking all the figures and checking the functions and early stages of how everything was built and how it was staged, especially for Euro Disneyland. And Euro Disneyland came out so much better because of that, I think. Because a lot of people who are art directors, they think they know everything, but when it comes to animatronics, a lot of times they're not paying attention, or they don't know little tricks and techniques that you have to have. You don't think about how the wrist should be made mechanically, uh, or how far the feet should be apart, or how they should be placed on the frame below, where the air valve should be, how close they should be to the figure. Just little things that actually will affect the figure.
Mm-hmm.
How it runs and performs. So,
Well, I think of like the late 80s and early 90s as a period of like real innovation in animatronics. Did you work on Great Movie Ride?
yes and no. There, I was involved as for the early stages on how everything should be, what functions should go where.
Mm-hmm.
But we really worked on the which, on exactly what to put in it. We went over a lot of the figures, and we were in a lot of arguments with the producer and the staff of the budget as for how much money we can spend, what can we do. But usually on that show, they were pretty supportive and they would listen, and you could tell like the Wicked Witch turned out fantastic.
Yeah.
And I wanted to program it, and I think Doug got to do it. So I probably was busy on something else, and that's the reason why. But yeah, overall, it came out pretty good. There's a few things I have mixed feelings on, but yeah.
Was working with figures based on celebrities that people know, like famous movie stars from the past, was that a challenging thing? Because it's something that people recognize.
Well, I had to go meet with a sculptor, the sculpting department, and as well as all the Maple guys, and give my 2 cents as for how the head should be sculpted and whether the anatomy is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a new lesson with me. Because I could see where it was off. And it's hard sometimes to tell the sculptor that, hey, you're not doing a good job, or this is not correct, and the anatomy's off just slightly. You're real close, but you're just slightly off, or the head's just a little too big, the chin's a little too pointed, whatever it would be. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to take for some of those people, and trying to tell them that you got to go back and work on this. So there's a lot of politics and tactics of how to get them to change it, because I can't go in and re-sculpt it for them. I can't. I'm not allowed to touch it, but I can only voice my opinion. And they would have all kinds of pictures and artwork and things, but you get into the point where you clash with artists, and some of them have really bad temperaments, and they don't want you to criticize their work or find something wrong with it. And that would happen sometimes on some of these shows. And I understand. I mean, I've done it myself where I've gotten like pissed off because someone criticized my work, and it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's
part of the process. Well, you mentioned the witch figure, which was so amazing, and I just wondered, what was it? What were the advancements in that? What was it that set that figure apart? What was it that was going on at the time, technologically?
Mainly, it was compliance. And what happened is, University of Utah, a company called Sarcos that came out of there. Disney Imagineering got working with them to create a software where we could speed up the functions and make them move much quicker. But then what they called compliance is what they call it, is that it acted like a shock absorber. It quickly moved, but it took all the shock away. Now, with the old figure, when you moved, if you moved an arm real quick, what would happen as soon as you stopped the arm, the whole body would shake.
Yeah.
And that would look terrible. But when you have compliance, it became this shock absorber through the whole figure, and it absorbed all that shock so that you could actually move things much, much quicker, right? So as for, being able to animate and know animation and acting, both Doug and I were great at it. Doug was probably even better than me. But now that he had compliance in there, he can move that figure so much faster. And there's kind of a learning curve with the technical support for being Doug, especially Eric Schwab, as for understanding how to tune the cards and all the little functions on it to adjust the compliance to get it just right. Because I noticed when we first did it, we did it on the auctioneer, and I programmed that auctioneer. And then we did it on Lincoln down at Disneyland, and I programmed Lincoln. But by the time we got to the witch got a lot better. But yet, it was really still the same compliance. We just kind of understood it a lot better of how to tune it correctly. And I saw a dramatic improvement as we went. And then when we went to American Adventure and redid that show, Doug and I kind of split it 50-50. And we had a whole bunch of figures where we put compliance in on those figures and reanimated it. And Chief Joseph, which Doug ended up animating, we kind of flipped the coin who gets what figures, and he got Chief Joseph. And he just got just so much more movement and life out of that. I was blown away. That compliance just made such a huge difference. And some of the other figures, I think it was Will Rogers and Mark Twain had it. You could see a big difference, and plus Doug and I were getting much better as animators. We kind of really stood the Anacon, and we understood how to combine functions and how to get the most out of the figure and what the correct process, what functions to start with and how to tune the figure, get it, prepared ahead of time. Yeah, big improvement. And I think when they went to Hall of Presidents, they started getting into, I think it was Obama was compliant figure. They got a lot more out of the figure. Right. But you have to be careful. You can actually move it too much to where it doesn't look good. You can actually overdo it.
I would imagine, well, as with any tool, once it improves, you're tempted to push those limits, and I would imagine at some point it becomes sort of cartoony. You're going too far with it.
Yeah, I am. Well, I guess it was Indiana Jones. Deborah Short had originally programmed it, and I guess Tony Baxter didn't like it. I was actually working at Pixar. I left Disney to work at Pixar on Toy Story and Bug's Life and Toy Story 2. And they asked me to come down during a break at Pixar to reprogram some of the Indiana Jones figures. And I think that all had compliance in it, as I recall, but I was able to just push it a little further. I used most of her animation and didn't go that far away. But I just, from experience, I just knew techniques of how to just get more out of them than what she got. But it was still basically the same animation she did. I just plussed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the Studios Park, you also worked on Muppet Vision, and I just wondered what it was like working with Jim Henson.
He was pretty cool. I really enjoyed working with him. He really nice guy, really laid back, really knew his craft really well. He was definitely an expert at his craft. But sometimes you get people high up there and they have an attitude or ego or something like that. He didn't have any of that. He was just down to earth, nice guy, and didn't give you any type of crap or problem. He just was very willing to work with you. And so when we were doing Muppet Vision, I had to figure out all the function list and for all the characters. But they wanted to program with this little puppet animatronic device that they wear like a Muppet, but they just hold it in their hand, and then it transfers that information directly. But I couldn't quite convince them that, I can do the same thing on Anacon, but I can actually do it more precisely and get even more range than what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
but he never used the Anaconda, so he wasn't willing to try it, and it would take him, his response, well, it'll take me 10 years to learn how to do that. This is what he would tell me. And I'd go, I haven't got 10 years. And in fact, he used to tell me, sometimes he goes, Dave, you don't even start getting good at this until you've done it for 10 years.
Wow.
And I said, you know what? That's with everything, I find. And he was so right about that. He walked into me one day and he said, hey, Davy, I understand you did the costumes on the Country Bear show. And I go, yeah, I designed them all. Yeah. Why do you ask? He says, well, can I see some of them? And so I just went back to my desk and I brought in some and showed him some of it. He goes, great. Can you design all the costumes for the Muppet Show for me? I go, what?
Oh, gee.
Are you sure about that? And it's like, yeah. I mean, the 3D Muppet Vision show. And I go, yeah, okay, whatever you want. And so the two old men, I did some some Hawaiian shirts and stuff like that, and did drawings of in color. And I thought, God, he's going to criticize this and rip me apart. And I brought all these drawings of all the costumes and showed them to me. He says, perfect. That's just what I want. These are perfect. It's like, yeah, don't change anything. I'm like, nobody does that. Nobody agrees the first time with everything. But he liked it all. And he walked in one day and we were talking, just he and I, about, we're working on a show for Star Tours, I think, or something. He walked up to me and he was looking at it. And he was really interested in how we did programming with the Anaconda and stuff like that, And because he was really interested in that whole other world with animatronics. And I talked to him about doing a completely different show with animatronics. And he goes, Dave, I really like this idea. It's like, do you think we can work on it together? And I go, yeah, sure. It's like, and he came back to me later that day, Dave, I really like this idea. I mean, we got to work on this. It's like, I think we can make it happen. And I said, no, I think it's a fantastic show. And I can't tell you what the show is about over this, but he died like a week or two later.
Oh, that's such a shame.
And I thought, oh my God, it was just so heartbreaking. It's like, so anyway,
that was such a huge loss. That was a real heartbreaker.
Yeah. And yeah, that was really sad. I remember working on the show that a couple of the animators and got really like cutting me down and trashing me, saying that I messed up on the function list because they didn't put a head tilt in the penguins. And like, how stupid could you be, Dave? Like, you got to have the head tilt in there. And I wanted to scream at these guys. I go, hey, I had the head tilt in there like 3 times. But when you're the role of chief animation producer, as Waithel was, you're constantly fighting with all these upper management on how many functions you can have, how much money you can spend. They're trying to take all the functions out to save money, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to put them in. And you put them in on your list, and then you get the list back, and they cut functions out of it. And you put them back in, and then they cut half as many functions out. And then you put them back in, and they cut more functions out. And it's just this constant battle that goes back and forth. And I would fight with, it wasn't just him, but sometimes it was Larry Shelton, who was a really brilliant guy, and he was overseeing Maple and how the figures are built. And he would argue with us sometimes like, I can't fit all those functions inside that head. That figure's too small. You have to take one of the functions out. You can have a head nod, head turn, head tilt, but you can't have all 3. and the penguin's just too small, it won't fit. So that was one of the arguments too. But what happened is after they built the figure and got it all done and realized that we needed it, Larry went back in and looked at the penguin, because now the penguin's all built. You can see how much space you have.
Mm-hmm.
Say, okay, I think we can cram this in there. And then they realized they could fit it in. But those are small little figures, and you're fighting a million things.
Yeah.
I've been yelled at so many times by Mickey Steinberg and the leaders and producers over money and budget, and I'm the bad guy always, because I'm the guy putting all the functions in and spending all the money. So I'm the guy who gets yelled at for
it. Right.
So,
well, last time you mentioned with regards to that, the dragon in Paris, and of course we talked about the fencing pirates. What other things from Paris stood out for you? Because that was an enormous project, I would imagine.
Sometime later, ask me about the Indian, by the way, before I forget.
Okay.
But that was on what is it? The Mark Twain, where the boat goes around at Disneyland.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. You can talk about that. I know the sort of
just dawned on me for some reason, because you asked me what else. I had designed that and came up with this idea of doing animatronics differently. I was always looking at things differently, as how we can run the cables, run the figure, and get more action out of them. So I came up with this idea, and I did a bunch of sketches of it running out his back of his waist. And by doing that, we could crouch him down by a fire,
mm-hmm.
and then he can stand all the way up. And we've never done that with a figure before. And we wanted to have it hydraulic, but the problem was he had to be outside. So we put it with an overhang to help protect him from the sun and the rain. But unfortunately, I really wanted to program it. It was like a big deal to me. And I was swamped. I think I was in Tokyo at the time, trying to do Star Tours or something like that. And I was doing a million things on Paris on all those shows. And so Mark Miller ended up programming that figure. And I really regretted that. I wish I had got to play with it, because I really wanted to learn from it. Because I actually had thought of a way to do the exact same thing to emulate Michael Jackson dancing. And I realized I could actually make Michael Jackson dance, and by the same principle. And I proved with that figure that we could do it. And that was something that they were trying to get Michael to be in one of our shows. And he came into work to see us a few times, and he would sit down with me. And Michael's a really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he would sit down, and he loved learning about animatronics. I mean, he just really enjoyed it. And he would sit down, and I'd show him how to program, and he would move the functions and play with one of the pirates or something like that. And he'd ask me all kinds of questions. And he'd have like a whole entourage of bodyguards with him. But I wasn't allowed to tell him about this idea or the price of anything or anything like that. But they were just trying to convince him into doing a show with a bunch of big stars. But it turns out, I guess it was too expensive, or it didn't happen, or they couldn't get a contract. But I think originally they're doing Captain EO, and he was involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And but they were they wanted him to do a whole other show.
Oh, interesting.
And it was just one of those ideas, the concept ideas, that just didn't happen. But I figured out how to actually do an animatronic of him. And it certainly was possible.
So that carried over into the figure on Rivers of America then?
Yes, and then I did my first sample of that to prove that it could be done from that figure.
That's
and
interesting.
Once I knew that figure was done, I was convinced that I could do the Michael Jackson figure. But anyway,
that's an interesting connection.
Or a dancing figure, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Because the legs were completely free. The legs could animate and do whatever you want. But anyway, let's go back to your other question about what was it, Euro Disneyland?
Paris, yeah.
Paris? Yeah. Man, that was a big project. I was really burnt out. I always get burnt out after every show. I'm always like sick and tired, and I need like a month vacation or so.
Well, I would imagine with Paris, so many of those shows were heavy on animatronics. You had the Pirates, you had Phantom Manor.
Yeah.
You had shows like Visionarium, which was Timekeeper here in America, which is a fondly remembered project.
My main shows were the Visionarium, programming that, and Dragon. But I was also overseeing everything in there. And Doug Griffith, who originally programmed the Pirates, couldn't go to Paris for some reason. And so I had to fill in for him and touch up any programming on the Pirates and things like that. But there wasn't much to do, but the Sword Fighters needed about a month of work to try and make them work a lot better, and mostly for maintenance. They were hitting their swords and they weren't supposed to hit. And because of that, you wanted to make them stop just before they hit, just so that it wouldn't put so much strain and stress on all the arm functions. But the Dragon was my favorite project of anything I think I've worked on. I really liked it. I got yelled at the most and threatened to be fired is what I felt like. But I certainly got scolded for spending too much money. And I never got any thank you from Tony Baxter, but I think he meant it anyway. So he knew I would get yelled at for adding all the functions and fixing it up. He and Tom Morris basically said, "You do it," because they knew that I would have to go ask for all this money. But it turned out great. I was really happy with it and the whole scene. And Skip Lang did a great work with rock work and the whole interior scene. And Tom Morris did a great job with the whole castle and, the painting, the colors, the rock work. When you put it all together, it was great teamwork. Somebody, I probably shouldn't even say his name, but somebody got on my case about it several times and says, "Hey man, I think that Dragon should talk to the audience when they come in. I think they should say hello, and just have a conversation with the audience and interact with them." And I go, "No, we're not doing that." It's like, that ruins everything. He was really adamant. He came back numerous times requesting I do that. And he was a really good creative person. I was really surprised. But again, this is one of those times where creative people clash, and sometimes they have ideas and you go, "No, that's not the vision I have. And that's not what I want to do. But thank you. And don't come back with that idea again."
Right. Well, I mean, it obviously worked. The Dragon worked because, everybody I know who goes to Paris comes back and talks about that Dragon. It's an impressive thing.
It really is. And the one in Tokyo is not impressive. They have the same Dragon, but it only has 2 functions, and they didn't have me to go through and say, "Okay, here's how you should have made it. Here's the functions you should have put in, and you could have made it just as realistic and amazing." And actually, I wanted to go even further with that Dragon with a neck. And I argued with Larry Shelton about the cost of it. We knew how to do it where we would make the whole neck all a flexible skin, like a dinosaur skin. And because originally it was all fiberglass. And, if you start bending all the joints in the neck, you have several different bends in the neck, but you'd have big giant gaps. And you would see those gaps. So you'd have to cover it with a flexible dinosaur skin, like a rubber skin. But it cost a lot of money to do the entire neck. I didn't have the money to do the entire neck. And I remember Joel and Cicero, I just got yelled at by Mickey Steinberg and scolded for being over budget. And Joel and Cicero, nice guy, really creative. lots of talent, comes in and we're at the dragon and he's getting on my case. This is like, I think you should have done the whole neck. You should have put the whole, flexible neck the whole way through. And I go, Joe, you just don't understand what I just went through to get that neck. Like, there's no way they're going to give me money for your neck. And he's like, no, you should have gone for it. Like, no, that's all right.
It's easier to say than to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and whenever Mickey would show up, he always would have, the budget guys with him with all their paperwork, and they would have everything, a whole list all typed out exactly what every single item cost. And, it's like, what can you cut today? I want something cut, cut something out of the show. Cut it. It's like, oh my God. You just have to put up with that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk about Visionarium a little, because it didn't have a lot of animatronics. It only had the two, but it was still really impressive. These were very impressive figures.
Really difficult to animate. Really, really difficult. Really dangerous too. In the aspect that you could hit, the robot character was right next to a console all around him. Mm-hmm. The other one was kind of a floating figure that was smaller that just kind of moved in and out and kind of interacted. That wasn't that hard. But the main human figure was constantly moving his arms and hands down to all the buttons. And all those buttons in the equipment was solid. And if you hit it too hard, you'd break the hand or you break the arm or shift it. The arm would slip on the shaft and get out of place. So it was a really dangerous figure to work on. And you had to really concentrate when you reset it back to a certain position, because sometimes when you reset back to where you want to start again, if the arms aren't out of the way of that console, they can get caught underneath of it and rip the arm off or break it or damage it or tear the button all off. Mm-hmm. So you really had to be on your game and concentrate. Now, when very first day, the first thing I did is I had them put up scaffolding in the middle of the theater and one story up, big enough for me to put the Anacon up there in a chair and stuff like that. I would tell everybody, well, I need it for the sight line so that I can see over that console so that the hand, I don't catch the hand on anything. I can see what I was doing. They go, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. If that's the case, we'll put the scaffolding up for you. But I was lying to them. What I was really doing is I didn't want people to bug me. So if I was up on the scaffolding, people would not go in there and climb up on the scaffolding to start talking and sitting down and chatting. And that whole theater was this situation where people just wanted to come in and hang out with you and watch you and just ask you like 100 questions and then bring their friends in and ask 100 more questions. But when I was up on the scaffolding and they couldn't reach me, nobody asked me any questions. Nobody talked to me. I just had all the freedom to do the programming. So that's what the scaffolding was for. It's just to get people to stop annoying me. But it came out really nice. We had a problem with it, and I argued with the art director and just the people involved that in Larry Shelton in the Mapo is that the head, they put all these body parts on it, which made the robot look really cool, right? Or the animatronic, if you want to call it. And it looked great. But the problem is it was too top heavy. And like I told you before, you add so much weight. When you add too much weight, it puts stress somewhere else. And this was the case. It wasn't fur. It was all these plastic parts that are all part of his costume. Mm-hmm. And they added a bunch of functions in his face as well, which looked great. But the problem was it added more weight. And what happened is all that weight transferred down to his waist, where his torso bend and his torso forebend was. Mm-hmm. And that linkage was really weak and couldn't handle that much weight. It was designed for pirates, but it wasn't designed for this figure. This was a new type of figure that was just much, much heavier than a normal pirate. And because of that, that whole linkage became a huge problem. So whenever you moved it, suddenly the figure would shake and vibrate and not want to work properly. It wasn't nice and smooth. It was always shaking, and that didn't look good with it shaking around. And anything you did caused it to shake. Just moving his arm would cause that function in the stomach to shake.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had Maple guys over there helping us, and I'd asked them several times to fix it. I'd asked Larry Shelton to fix it before they sent it over, and they didn't fix it. And I think they tried, they just didn't know how to fix it. And the Maple guys were over there, and they were getting really frustrated with me. They took it apart several times trying to fix it, figure out a way to beef it up so it could handle all this weight and stress. And they put it all back together and said, no, they didn't fix it. I was really frustrated because I had to have this fixed. And I couldn't convince this Maple guy was really the very best Maple guy in the entire Maple end of the company as for fixing figures and building them and maintaining them. He was really, really good. And I was glad he was there. But I walked up to him one day and I said, you know what? You're over here because you're the very best in Maple. The main reason you're here in Europe is because we thought that you could fix and solve any kind of problem we would come up with. Now, if you're telling me you can't fix it, then I'm not going to argue about it anymore. It obviously can't be fixed. All right? But I just want you to understand that's why we brought you over here.
Mm-hmm.
He heard that. And that night, he took the whole figure apart and he figured out a way to fix it. And the next morning it came in, it was completely solved. He had his pride on the line. He had to prove that, yeah, he is the best. And he was. He figured it out. But I played this acting job on him, and I was actually acting and just to see if I could talk him into fixing it. And it was really an acting job on him. But
it worked.
But it worked, So sometimes that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you made the jump to Pixar after all this. What drove that? What was it like going back to film and animation?
Several reasons. I always liked film. And that's where I started, right? Mm-hmm. The Fox and Hound and Cal Arts and animated films. And I like the whole idea that you got your name and credit on the film. Where theme parks, I never got my name on anything. You really didn't get credit. This is about the most credit we have is what we're doing today is where I get to talk to you or go up at, some convention once in a while and they might interview you. But that always bothered me. And Tony Baxter and Tom Morris and some of those guys brought that up all the time, especially Tony, that there's something wrong about that because there was some really good talent and people should have got credit for it. And it wasn't just me. I mean, you look at Mark Davis and Sam McKinn and Frank Armitage and Exitencio and Willie Crump. I mean, there's a whole list of people, Waitha Rogers. They're all amazing people. And I just wish there was a way to give them all the talent, recognition that they deserve because they really contributed a lot. And it goes beyond just artists. I mean, there are people like Eric Squap was probably the most talented guy at Epcot. People never would have thought of that, but he solved so many technical problems and fixed so many issues. I mean, hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. And he never complained. He loved fixing it. He loves solving some kind of problem. And none of us could figure it out. And he'd always, yeah, I'll do it. And he would have it fixed. And Disney should have paid him a lot more money, but he saved the day many, many times. But, he never got the recognition. You don't get your name on anything. So what happened is I have friends at Pixar. John Lasseter was a friend of mine, and Joe Ranft and Steve Rapitage and Dr. I knew a lot of these people. In fact, I tried to hire some of them to work in animatronics, but they'd rather work at Pixar. And I kind of understood why. I was like, well, yeah, this is much better. Well, they invited me up one day and said, hey, come up here. We want to show you what we're doing. I didn't take it that seriously, but I thought, I haven't seen San Francisco in a while, and I'll go up there. And I just kind of want to see what they're doing. And they showed me the Army Man scene, and I was just blown away. I thought, oh my God, you guys have finally done this. You finally figured out how to do computer animation for animated films. You proved it. Mm-hmm. And they go, we want to offer you a job. Like, wait, what a second. You brought me up because you want to offer me a job? Yeah, no, we want to hire you. And they were real serious about it. And the producer then took me aside and offered me a job. And I said, well, that's a lot less pay than I'm making right now. And so I kind of said, no, thanks. And they kept trying to talk me into it. Well, at the time, I didn't like, I was really frustrated with some of the management and all the, hassles of fighting over budget and, functions and getting scolded for things and, not animating fast enough. And just all these meetings I had to go to try and get anywhere. And I couldn't get any money or funding for special effects. I couldn't fix any problems. They wouldn't give me money for it. I just got so frustrated. I said, like, what am I doing here? So, I just said, okay, Pixar, I'll come up there. And I went up there, and I didn't realize how difficult it was. Oh, yeah. Their animation is way harder than what I was doing. Way, way harder. And it's way more complicated in the software, everything. Mm-hmm. It was like going to another planet. It was just completely different. And my first day there, the very first day there, Universal Studios sends a headhunter to try and contact me to offer me a job to pull me away from Disney and Pixar.
Really?
So, the very first day I'm working there. And this headhunter is calling me 5 times a day, saying, we want you at Universal Studios, whatever it takes. What do you want, money-wise? We'll give you whatever you want. Wow. We want to improve Universal Studios animatronics, and we want you. And I said, no, thanks. And I said, I just started a job today. Today's my first day. It's like, go away, don't call me anymore. But she just kept calling and calling and calling, and eventually I worked for him part-time, and it was okay. I mean, I did the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park and did a bunch of shows. After Toy Story was done and I had a little free time, Pixar didn't have any work for me. So I said, can I just go work 10 weeks down at Universal and do this dinosaur ride, Jurassic Park? And they said, sure, because we don't want to pay you. So they said, yeah, go ahead. It's like, but you got to come back in 10 weeks, And so in 10 weeks, I finished the dinosaur ride and came back. And I had a lot of fun doing it. So, yeah. But then they called me again and said, oh, we got these other rides, like down in Florida, we want you to work on. So they had 3 more shows they wanted me to work on.
Was that for Islands of Adventure down here, or
there was, I can't even remember. One was a Popeye ride.
Yeah,
I don't remember what the other 2 were. They wanted me to figure out all their animatronics and their function list and how they all worked and all that stuff. But anyway, I just like Pixar better, Mm-hmm. But then Tony Baxter and Marty Sklar started calling me up and saying, well, why don't you come work down here on your weekend and on your holiday and day off instead of Universal, and we'll pay you more. So I went down and did work for them, and I did the Indiana Jones and some other stuff but I didn't enjoy it that much, you know.
Did you do the dinosaurs for the Animal Kingdom attraction?
No, I had designed a dinosaur ride at the same time. Joe was doing a dinosaur ride for Animal Kingdom,
Okay.
and mine was a water ride, more like Pirates of the Caribbean, where you rode through on a boat. And I did all the illustrations and color illustrations, and well, they were watercolor, and they actually really liked it. And Marty liked it, and said, "Well." Then Tony Baxter got into it and went to Marty and took the whole show away from me and gave it to Chris Dietz and kicked me off the show. So that didn't sit well with me, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to quit Disney, because there was, you know, that wasn't cool, you know, doing it behind my back. But then they tried to sell that same dinosaur ride for Disneyland, but it was so expensive that they canned it. It was just too much money. But they kept Joe's, and Joe would come over and say, "Hey, I like some of your illustrations of what you're doing. Can I borrow your drawings?" And then he would take my drawings and pitch it in his show. So he was actually using some of my artwork during his pitch to help sell his. So in a way, I guess it was beneficial because his did get sold and got me. But yeah, I did go over, like, you know, all the functions and stuff on there, but I didn't program any of the figures.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I take that back. I programmed one dinosaur, and they asked me to come down and program. It was a dinosaur that was in the water outside. And
right. Yes. On the boat ride outside. Yeah.
I forget where it was, but anyway, I was miserable. I was just getting eaten by mosquitoes and these black flies the whole time. And Eric Swap wouldn't even work with me, but I understand why, because the mosquitoes were so bad. He just like set up the console and said, "Okay, I'm getting out of here. And I'll see you at the end of the day." And it's like, oh my God, there's mosquitoes everywhere. And these really nasty black flies that just kept biting you and flying in your eyes and your ears and stuff. And the pain you have to go through just to program a dinosaur.
Yeah. Oh, I would imagine that was a tough one because it was, I mean, in actual, I guess you would say not controlled water. Like when you're in an indoor environment, you have a closed system, but this was outdoors in the Florida elements of all things.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that was a tough one.
Yeah, well, it was the flies and mosquitoes that made it tough. It wasn't everything else. I mean, I knew how to program really well. I knew how to animate, and I felt comfortable doing it. And Joe put me on it another week to just plus it even more. So I guess it came out fine, but yeah, it was just uncomfortable situation.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Programming figures sometimes is a really dangerous job. I've been hurt several times. And you don't want to get hurt, and you don't want to like work all night to where you're a zombie the next day, to where you can't drive home, and you fall in the water and pirates and. Right. What was this? Splash Mountain, I almost got killed, where they turned on the water while I was programming.
Oh, no.
That was one of them. Yeah, I remember, people bugging you all the time was always a problem. And I've mentioned this to you numerous times, where they'd come in and it's just human nature to like want to come see the show. Right. And that's fine. But when you're trying to concentrate, you just don't want people bugging you. And you don't even want them like looking in the window or looking in and seeing you. You just want them all to go away. Because you really have to concentrate, because you're trying to think of things in 1/30th of a second and hit everything on sync, right on beat. And you're thinking that tight. especially lip sync or trying to hit dialogue on words and so forth. You can't have someone standing right next to you, playing with their cell phone or do anything. Well, what happened is all of us complained about it. We all had this problem. So the animation department finally built this room to where we had our own room that was closed off, so the public and the rest of the employees couldn't come in and bug us.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a secondary door that went into the office space at the other end. And we would lock the door and we would put shades over the window so you couldn't even look in. And this was, a whole room that was big enough for us to program maybe one or two figures, and you could have two people working at the same time. It was so much nicer. And we had a couple pirates in there that we were programming and playing with. And one of them had a sword. And I had been programming it, trying to learn about it. And I forget I think this was just a demonstration is all it was that I was doing. But he had a real thick sword in his hand, an aluminum sword. And we had strict rules in place where you weren't allowed to come in when, I was programming this figure, because it's swinging a real sword around. It could slit your throat or hurt you.
Yeah.
And we had like a barrier rope around it and stuff like that. And, we had the door locked so you couldn't come in. We had the shades closed. And Paul Reedy, who was the manager of the department, one day I'm programming, I'm running the show, and suddenly he walks in from the back door against all the rules, like we said. And he walks in and right up to the pirate. And right when I'm running the show, and the pirate swings the sword around, hits him right in the forehead and slices the top of his forehead and puts a big gash in his head.
Oh, no.
And, oh, my God, I just killed the manager. I really cut him. I really hit him good. Big giant bump on his head. And he backed off, and he's like, oh, my God. And, went to bandage it up. And I went in and apologized to him. He says, no, it's not your fault. We have strict rules, and I didn't follow my own rules, and I'm the manager. And I didn't even follow the rules, and I disobeyed all of them. And I walked in the wrong door right into the scene while the figure was running. I deserved to be hit in the head with it. And so he didn't blame me for it. But, yeah, I cut him pretty good.
Yeah, it's dangerous business. That's what we've learned for certain. Well, you've worked a lot in films. You've taught. You've done a lot of things since your Imagineering days. What are you up to these days?
Right now, I'm working on some animated movies ideas with a company in Canada. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere or what. We've got a couple of feature film and a short film, but yeah, I just been working on the last few weeks, so I'm just kind of learning. But it's fun stuff, and I'm involved in writing the script and doing illustrations for both, and I'm just having fun.
That's great.
Yeah, I can't say what exactly what the project is, and I can't say much about it, but
sure,
yeah, that's normal.
Yeah, absolutely, we understand that. Well, Davy, I can't thank you enough for your time you've given us, for your stories. Really appreciate it. Everybody's really enjoyed our first episode. So I appreciate you coming back and taking the time.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So hopefully you'll keep doing this and interviewing more people and keep the interest going.
We'll do it. Well, that brings to an end part 2 of our interview with Davy Feiten. Thanks to Davy for his time, very generous with his time. Jeff, a lot of territory there.
A lot of territory, a lot of, I need the Davy Feiten safety manual. It seems like there's a lot of job hazard that he's telling us about that it's good to know. If I ever
It's
get into
just
programming animatronics, I'm gonna keep all the tables away from them. I'm gonna keep myself away from them. Anybody, if you see an animatronic with a sword, stay away. Just good stuff to know.
absolutely. You almost want to go in full padding. Like you see those people that train like German shepherds to be guard dogs or whatever, just padding down your arms, padding just all over your body, because it sounds like it is a dangerous occupation.
Yeah, you got to bring your own Garco or something to, keep guard on it. I don't know. Yeah, it does sound.
Who knows what danger Walt was in when he was around Garco? We didn't even know.
It's true. It's true. Oh, thanks to Davey. I mean, we always appreciate these people spending hours and hours of their time telling us their stories. I mean, these stories are priceless and such an interesting view into, I feel like he is kind of, rubs shoulders with all kinds of people like operations and Imagineers, which he was one, animators, ride operators. It's just an interesting little Venn diagram of the people he is rubbing elbows with.
Absolutely. When you think about all the disciplines that are involved with costuming and maintenance and the tech side of it, and it is a very varied field of people you come in contact with when you're in that job. And so it was really interesting to hear, all of those different people that he had a chance to work alongside.
That's right.
A lot of characters.
Oh yeah. So thanks to Davey for that. And Michael, what's coming up next for us?
Well, next up, we're going to get a little energized. Going to keep it going with this Epcot thing. Talk a little bit about the universe of energy.
It makes the world go around. That's
It
what I
does.
hear.
So they say. It does.
This is, a classic.
Yeah, well, one of the epic opening day attractions at Epcot Center, and quite a bit to talk about there. A lot of innovative systems, a lot of, high concept filmmaking, I guess you would say. A lot of tech in there, and so there'd be a lot to talk about.
One that lasted in some form until very recently. So
I know it was a survivor. At least people can pretty well remember what the ride system was like, even if they don't remember the original films. They remember what that ride was like.
Right. And, we always have our monthly live streams to look forward to. Michael, if I wanted to see what these monthly live streams were about, how would I do this?
Well, the live stream is just yet another wonderful benefit for our Patreon members. Patreon members who sign up get early access to episodes, get a little packet of Progress City swag, get some extra content in their feeds, and of course, get access to our monthly live stream where we watch rare video and see rare pictures and just have a fun time in the chat talking to everybody. And it's a good time. Good, clean fun.
It is. We always enjoy it, as we say. How would one sign up for this Patreon?
Well, they just need to go to patreon.com/ProgressCityUSA and sign up. It's easy as pie. You get, and now, now that we've done it so long, you can view all the old live streams as well. So you've got more than 20 old live streams you can go back and watch. So that's a ton of content there. You've got the extra audio that we've uploaded over the years. You've got all the documents there that I've scanned for the library. So patreon.com/ProgressCityUSA and check it out. You might have some fun.
That's
and
right.
It's tax deductible, which is the most fun of all.
Yes. Thanks to all of our existing Patreons and just all of our Patreons, I don't know, Patreoneers. Perhaps. But thanks to all your listeners. If you made it this far, why don't you drop us a line? You could email us, get in the mailbag. We haven't done the mailbag in a while. That's podcast@progresscityusa.com. We're also on Twitter. Michael's at ProgressCityUSA. I'm at Jeff G. Crawford. You could even go to your streaming platform of choice and leave us a nice review. I saw we had a new one up. And it's always nice to have those.
That's nice.
But yeah, please be in touch with us. We love hearing from folks and getting feedback and even sometimes getting stumped and having to go do more research.
Yeah, that's always fun. It's always fun to, I like getting the prompt of what to talk about because that saves us the mind power of having to figure out what to talk about.
That's right.
Your prompts make it easier for us, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely, they do. So we will continue on next episode with a trip into Epic's Lost, the world of petroleum and all kinds of energy.
The world primeval.
The world primeval. And we will check out energy. Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.